Hey, have you heard the word on the pre-show circuit that we have a brand new Lions of Liberty mini documentary out right now that you can watch by going to lionsofliberty.com/live free. Yes, it is the Live Free documentary made by our buddy Dan Smots over at Goulash Films and of the Systems Down Pod, chronicling the story of the Lions of Liberty over the past 6 years, also including a lot of footage shot at this year's Pork Fest, which you will not want to miss, frankly. But just goes into our motivations, what we're trying to achieve, how we got where we are, and what we want to do moving forward. So check that out, guys. lionsofliberty.com/live free. And if you want to support us, go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. And if you join right now at $10 or more, you get a free Taxation is Death mug. You heard right. Taxation is not just theft. Because really, what are you doing with all that money? What are you doing with that theft money? You're bombing people. You're taking away people's rights. You're stomping on liberties. Get your mug today.
Welcome to Electric Libertyland, here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Electric Libertyland. Oh, shit. Wait a minute. What episode?
What happened? Who's the guest?
Sorry.
Oh, my God.
Where
are we?
On this show? On 142. That's it. 142. All right.
No, don't. We keep that first part. What are you talking about?
That's gold?
Yeah, that's
gold?
Amazing. Why not? I mean,
all right, done.
Just confusion to begin with. No, if you want to start over, you can. It's your show. I don't want to come in and host your show. You host your show.
You're the professional here, man. You've got more professional hosting, paid gig experience. The voice you're hearing is Ryan Stout. I believe this is your third time on the show, so you know.
Nice. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. There's
golden.
There's nothing consistent about this.
No, it's just you throw shit against the wall and whatever bounces back at you. Because I actually have a trampoline wall. My wife was against it. Best investment I ever made. Not only for throwing shit, but I'll tell you what, you want to abuse your wife without leaving any marks. That's
I'm going to be honest with you. Throwing shit against a trampoline wall doesn't feel like a good idea. It feels like a good way to get shit all over yourself.
That's what I said when the salesman called me. But you know what?
I found a fetish.
And I was wrong at the end.
Okay.
Hashtag I found a fetish. I guarantee it exists. I'm going to make it into a website. So yes, Ryan, awesome. Great having you back on the show, of course. And I want to tell everybody at the top of the show. So Ryan, he is one of my favorite comics. I have loved to have him on before. A big fan of all of your comedy stylings. And of course, you have a new album out, which is Man in a Suit. Did I say that wrong? Man in the Suit. Sorry, Man in the Suit. And there we go. And you've got a fantastic picture of you hanging microphone out of the front of your trousers, which I love.
So it's actually there's a very famous photograph by Robert Mapplethorpe that hangs in the Guggenheim called Man in Polyester Suit. And in that photo, it is not a microphone hanging out. It is a large black penis. And so when I released the album art for this album, I got messages from a lot of people going, I can't believe you're the first comic to ever parody that photo. But I was shocked that I couldn't find anybody else parodying the photo either. So I was happy to do it.
I just feel stupid that I had no idea what the reference was to begin with.
It's okay, because he's been dead for a lot of years. And you know, in your education growing up, they're not showing you a lot of erotic gay male photography.
It's odd, you know, of all the black dicks I saw growing up, none of them were hanging in the Guggenheim.
None of them. And that's the hard part. But I think it's kind of interesting too why I picked that, because Robert Mapplethorpe, I don't know if you know about his history, but he got into a kind of there was an uproar about his photography because he's taking these photos and they're amazingly crafted photos in a time when photography was not considered an art form. And there's a lot of gay sex in some of his pictures. And the lighting is amazing. The composition is amazing. But people had a very puritanical hatred toward the subject matter. And what really kicked it off was he had gotten money from the National Endowment for the Arts.
I knew that was going to be
And
what had done it. Just like piss Christ.
So that, of course, set off a firestorm. And, even though he wasn't showing the photographs to children, even though they were on private property, they were behind, they were in a safe space, if you want to call it that. People didn't like the government giving money. And I always thought that was such an interesting tidbit, because conservative people are totally fine with very liberal, loud pieces of art, as long as those are on private property. Totally fits with the concept of private property. And but once they see their tax dollars getting pushed towards something that they don't support, they go, whoa, hang on. But when it comes to stand-up comedy, we are doing something very loud and often provocative in comedy clubs, which is a private space, and conservatives tend to be fine with that. They go, yeah, you have to have an ID to get in. You have to be 21 in order to go into that bar and listen to the people talk. And yet it is the liberal people who fought for us to have a safe space who are very upset with how we're using our safe space. And they often make the comparison with yelling jokes at someone on the street versus doing it in a comedy club, and they say it's exactly the same. And you go, no, it's not fucking exactly the same. There's a huge difference between blindsiding someone with jokes on the street and somebody who walked into a building that said comedy and looked at a ticket that said comedy and sat down and listened to fucking comedy. And
precisely right. And it's like, it almost, I mean, in a way, did you watch the Chappelle special that came out?
I watched the first portion of it, but we were also, the audience doesn't know this because you and I talked about it already. We were planning a wedding. We were putting a wedding together last minute and taking off to Hawaii to elope in private without anybody knowing. So I have to catch up on Chappelle's special. I have to watch Bill Burr's Paper Tiger.
Yeah, I haven't seen Burr yet either, unfortunately. I was going to try to watch, but I just haven't had a chance. But Chappelle did say, kind of to your point, this is voluntary interaction. You're going to the club, you're paying the price. You can see most of the time, if you make any sort of effort, who's going to be on the show. And, with Chappelle's special, he got all this pushback because he was doing some accents we'll get into, talking about trans people. But he said this, to the audience during the show. He goes, look, you can get upset about this, but people are going to see this on Netflix. If you're getting upset about this special, well, you clicked on my face. I didn't force you to do this. It's not, I'm not accosting you in a restaurant and trying this out. You are opting to watch me. And thus, you have to take some of the blame for this, to being exposed to it. And also, if you're opting in, that's part and parcel of the contract we're agreeing to. I may say something that it might offend you, but at the same time, you're opting to see what I'm going to say.
I think the audience has a big misconception about what they're opting into. On one hand, you hear a lot of people say, well, I paid to laugh. And I always tell them, no, you did not. You walked up to the box office and you said, hello, I would like a ticket. And the box office Tiki typed on a little computer and looked at you and said, sorry, sold out. Does that mean they're sold out of laughter? No, it doesn't mean that. It means they don't have any seats. You paid for a seat, so you could have the privilege of watching the show on private property, and nobody else gets to see that show. That's what you're paying for. You're just paying to see it. And the second big misconception people have is people to this day still think that comedians are making it up on the spot. They still believe that these are not tried and tested jokes. Like the controversy, and I don't want to say controversy, but this common discussion is comedy, art, or entertainment. I always shake my head and smile and I go, comedians are more scientists than either of those things, because what we're shooting for is repeatable results. Not only do I want a joke, I want a joke that works again and again and again and again and again in a lot of different situations. And then once I've found a joke that works like that, I put it on the special. So if you're complaining about the special, you're complaining literally about all the audiences that have already approved of that joke.
That is a fascinating analogy, and I agree completely. Especially, like you said, you're testing out audiences, you're honing it, you're basically finding out what works and what doesn't work the entire process. And this is why I get so bugged when I see people like Louis C.K. He's testing out material, trying to come back, or anybody that's out there testing material out in these clubs. It's like, to use your analogy, if a scientist halfway through an experiment has his experiment just get blown up and canceled because somehow somebody got a little cell phone camera in, caught him, whatever, trying to boil milk to get the impurities out of it and prove, Louis Pasteur, and now Louis Pasteur is exposed on the internet and no longer can tell jokes anymore, and the experiment dies right there.
Or they catch Louis Pasteur early on in the process, try to figure out how do I do this thing, and then he's doing something they don't like, and they say, well, you're canceled now. You're not allowed to do that anymore. We can't support you emotionally. We can't give you financial support. We can't speak well of you in public. Now, all of a sudden, you're a pariah, and now your work ends because just no.
Yeah. And you never know what could become of that work down the line. I mean, I can't even think about how many comedians in general must have, said something, done something in the past wherein they would now be exposed as a hater and a racist and a bigot and all these other things. Wherein fortunately, they were before the time of the internet or before the time there was an easily searched record. And they probably went on to make all these fantastic shows. Like God knows what Seinfeld said. God knows what Larry David could have said in the past. Any of these comedians that went on to create these amazing, groundbreaking shows, even The Simpsons. I mean, Christ, The Simpsons are trying to cancel culture with the Pooh and all these other characters. Now it's going to affect the evolution not only of comedy but just of entertainment as we know it, having this ability and with people going out of the way to cancel.
I always felt like the real problem with the loud audience response that's happening is that comedians are doing our job. The comedian gets on stage and tells a joke, and some people in the audience say that joke is racist, and other people in the audience say no, it's not. And then those audience members fight. And then the people who are the loudest are the people who are adamant about proving that the comedian is racist. Whereas the comedian should be able to sit back and say, hey, as long as there are people defending me, you can't just subjectively project this racism thing onto me. The same goes for misogyny. The same goes for punching down. You can't just subjectively project that onto a comedian and say that it's true when there's a whole group of other people who are saying it's not true. And when the comedian has the audience divided like that, then I always say the comedian gets to step off stage and go to the green room and have a nice snack. And then you guys get to fight it out. The consumers get to fight it out. Right. Now, the other side of that, it is so strange to me that audience members are obsessed with two things that happen with comedians. Audience members are obsessed with the idea of comedians getting heckled, and they're obsessed with the ideas of bombing. Now, here's the thing. If I have a joke about race and it bombs, and a group of people say that's racist, and there's no one there to defend me, well, now I have a problem. Of course, now there's a problem, but it's only a problem if there's nobody defending me. And instead, they want to create a world where the defenders don't exist and then push cancel culture on us. And it's like, no, you can't cancel somebody that has defenders.
Right. Well, you're seeing that play out almost in real time with Dave Chappelle. And I haven't watched Bill Burr's special nor read reviews on it yet, but Chappelle, almost immediately, the special comes out, the media gets a sneak preview of it. And on Rotten Tomatoes, they use just the worst reviews they can find. Now, I had seen far more reviews, but they custom picked. There were like six reviews up there, all giving it, just panning it as punching down of have Dave Chappelle finally jumped ship? Dave Chappelle's time has passed. He's a relic of a bygone era. This man who had created comedy that was groundbreaking, that took on race in a hilarious fashion, flipped things on its head. And as I said, oftentimes would create conversation around it or come at you from away. And you and I have discussed this, wherein you're surprised, you don't see the punchline coming. Instead of this kind of, way comedy exists in the current era of, Daily Show style. I see the punchline, the first word. But you see that Rotten Tomatoes picks these 6 reviews, 0% rating for a whole week, 0%. Then they finally allow the customer ratings or the common man to weigh in, shoots up 99%. So the audience reaction, 99% positive. Everybody on there just defending the living shit out of Chappelle versus the woke culture reviews. And to a larger extent, the tech I guess, the tech company trying to push the quote wokeness.
Trying to socially engineer that. Trying to socially engineer a response to comedy. And that's what, as scientists, we hate. Because we're like, no, I did the testing and I know what the reaction is. You can't just pretend that the reaction isn't the reaction because you feel like it shouldn't be. And which is ultimately the hard thing that's happening on the left that is turning people off, which is when they don't get the results they want, they try to socially engineer it so that it works in their favor anyway. And the thing that hardcore leftist people hate about stand-up comics is that they tell us all the time that we, the comedians, don't get to decide what's funny. The audience decides. And then as soon as the audience decides it's funny and the leftist doesn't like it, the leftist goes, well, the audience doesn't matter, and let me tell you why you're wrong. And I'm like, well, who the fuck are you to decide? If I don't have the power to decide, and what gives you the power? And they go, well, you have to accept criticism. And I'm like, I did, from a whole audience of people. We let the audience vote. Yeah. I thought you wanted the audience to, I thought you wanted democracy. What happened?
Well, man, you're hitting the nail on the head as far as what I thought, when we looked at the last election cycle, right? Trump surprised the living shit out of everybody when he won. Well, the majority of people. I actually secretly thought he might win for the exact reasons that I'm about to talk about. Is the left as a whole, and this is really upsetting to me, is it seems like they're not using their own scientific philosophy or our scientific philosophy to gauge what works and what doesn't, or put the beat on where the audience is reacting to. What their actual concept and thought is. They got this big rebuttal to this really leftist philosophy they're pushing out there. You saw the rise of Donald Trump, which would have never happened in any other time. And yet, instead of listening and saying, okay, you know what, we're not on track here, we've lost the majority of America, this is not what they want, they double down on it. And then they tell us, like you're saying, then they tell us that we're racist and we're wrong and we're idiots and we can't go down this road again. And they throw something even more crazy and tell us that we have to go that way.
And it's that kind of thinking, that kind of just doubling down on craziness, like it puts people like me and probably you in a bad position where, like, I can't think of anyone who would be in the Oval Office that would be worse than Donald Trump. I cannot think of a single person. And yet I am terrified that the Democrats are going to put somebody up who I'm going to be able to say, I think they're worse.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, other than maybe Andrew Yang, and did you watch any of the last debates? They've all been a slog and a nightmare. But did you catch any of them? I haven't caught
any of them. But I will say this: of everything I've seen of Andrew Yang, he seems to take this attitude of like, well, this is all ridiculous. And I love that, because that is what is happening. This has all become very absurd, everybody.
Yeah, it is classic kind of. I mean, it's almost like we're watching a film where they're casting the most ridiculous, out of the world characters. It's like a mad world. You never see that old classic film where you've got a bunch of nutballs desperately racing for the treasure. That's what the Democrats have rolled out here. You've got just these manic, insane people. And then, Andrew Yang's the one guy that, while I don't agree with everything he's saying, at least he seems like, despite these people being his elders, at least he seems like an adult in the room. At least he's saying, practically speaking, we can't have these massive debts, and we can't force people to do this. We can't have militarism all over the world.
When he compared,
it's amazing.
Bernie's idea for government jobs, and he's like, well, let's just hand out gray overalls too. It just seems so dystopian. He was so
he's like, we don't want to work.
He was so kind of like shrug his shoulders about it, like, well, this is crazy. And I enjoyed that so much. But yeah, there is a And I don't think it's necessarily a sign of the political times that this is happening in stand-up comedy. I think this is what happens literally every time stand-up comedy gets popular, which is people come out of the woodwork to say, hey, if you're going to get on stage and do that mean thing, it's because you're a mean person. If you're going to say something that's about race, then you're a racist. And that's been happening since 1945. And what's weird is when comedy is not popular, those voices kind of subside.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also that, you see this in just film and television as well, though, is that, people have a very hard time understanding, to your point earlier, that comedians are taking on personas. And you see this even in general actors and the roles they take on. You will see certain portions of America actually fault actors for taking roles in which they play a racist or a sexist and whatever else, or that those roles are written. Like I was talking with the Simpsons reference, they say that it's racist to have a character like Apu and not understand that you need to have certain characters that are invented to showcase a certain point of view that you might be against, but without the ability to showcase that person and make fun of them or make fun of the situation and showcase the differences, the comedy in it, turn a situation on its head to provide you a different point of view that might diffuse a certain racist stereotype, you're not going to get anything done. You can't accomplish it.
It's the classic problem of if you include a character, you're doing it wrong. And that if you don't include the character, well, now you're excluding a whole race of people. And you just kind of go, well, listen, it's going to be a subjective thing about whether or not we're doing it right or wrong. And you're going to nitpick it to death. And you're going to make a big, long list in the column that says wrong. And in the column that says the things we did right, you're going to leave that blank. And you're just going to pretend that there's nothing in it. And their idea of accountability isn't very good accounting. It's credits and debits where they only look at the debits. And that's a tough binary world to live in. And that kind of splitting up, I think, comes with the territory of punch up, not down. I can rationalize any joke to be punching down. There's a piece of humor theory that says every joke has a victim. And while that theory has holes in it, it's not a perfect theory. It is not a humor law. It's still a theory. If a joke has a victim, well, then I can rationalize away that the person telling the joke is hurting somebody who doesn't deserve to be hurt.
Right. And as soon as we start doing that, and this is where I feel like, in truth, what's essentially been happening with comedy is that everybody is always constantly arguing for, we have to protect the victims. Meanwhile, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, anytime I've told a joke that you could say, okay, this has a victim to it, or this is going after a certain race of people or a religion or a type of people, the people that enjoy that joke typically and laugh the hardest are the people that I'm making fun of. And the people that are going after me, or might say that was inappropriate, are never the people from that group or that sex or anything else. They're just people that want to showcase their ability to defend someone else's
Showcasing their ability to defend somebody else has been a thorn in my side since 2001 when I started in San Francisco, because that's where I started my stand-up career. So I saw this bubbling up in audiences a long time ago, and then kind of crafted my act around it. And I think that's kind of why I've gotten away with so much stuff on stage, is because I've been able to kind of be a weasel about it and work my way around the hard edges that I know that social justice warriors will bring up. And I always have some sort of, people have called it kind of a trap door or a backdoor escape.
Yeah. I would agree with that assessment, actually.
People have complimented me again and again, like, you get to push their button, and as soon as they object, you get to slide out this side door they didn't know existed. And I say, that took a lot of planning. Took a lot of fearful planning.
No, it is true. And again, I encourage everybody listening to this to really go and check out all of Ryan's albums. And again, you can go to ryanstout.com. And I'm sure you have all listed for purchase there, or just on
Spotify
iTunes
and Pandora.
Spotify, anywhere. Anywhere and everywhere. A comedy can meet your ears.
One thing I do want to talk about regarding that kind of subjectivity of punching down is people are very good at imagining somebody getting upset at the joke, and yet they have no practice at imagining the positivity that comes with jokes. And I think the best example is I got off stage. I was in Minneapolis, and this very nice woman came up to me, and she said, "Hi, I wanted to talk to you because you were talking about suicide a lot on stage." And I wanted you to know that my son tried to take his own life, and he was permanently disabled, and he lives at home with me, but he did survive. And I always thought that I would never, ever laugh at suicide ever again. And you were up there and you were doing all these jokes about suicide. And I found myself laughing. And I wanted to thank you because you were able to find a way to make light of the one thing that I would never laugh at. Mm-hmm. Now, that same set of jokes, I'm doing them at a different club in Phoenix. And immediately somebody's tweeting at me from the audience telling me I'm an awful piece of shit. Right. And how dare I? And can't I imagine that there are people in the audience who've been victimized by suicide? Now, jump again to the Bay Area. And a woman comes up to me after the show and she looks angry. And she says, I wanted you to know that we came to the club tonight because the love of my life killed himself 5 years ago to the date. And I thought I was going to lose it during the suicide material. But you know what? It was actually really funny. And then there's
why did she come up looking so angry?
And then there's this kid in St. Louis who comes over and says, I just wanted to shake your hand because my best friend killed himself 2 months ago. And I know if you were here, he would have really enjoyed your jokes. Now, unfortunately, the social justice movement will gladly ignore the woman in Minneapolis and the woman in the Bay Area and the kid in St. Louis to take the side of the nutbag in Phoenix who's angry. Yeah. And you go, how can you do that? How can you ignore all the positivity and all the magic that comes with humor that helps these people who have every reason not to laugh anyway, and instead take the side of the person who's hurt? Because obviously they're going to be hurt. Like, it is not a foregone conclusion that because someone suffered trauma that they're going to be hurt by the joke. It's actually quite the opposite, that somebody who's offered trauma, been traumatized, could be healed by the joke. So let the fucking joke happen.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Well, throughout time, comedy is the first thing people turn to after tragedy, for the most part, because it's like it can make you feel better. It unifies you with the community, and like you said, it's a way to look at something differently. And that's what people don't understand about good comedy, anyway, is it gives you that ability to look at something in a different light, which can unite people from different cultures. It can bring people together on a topic, and it can help people cope. It's like we were talking about with cutting off the evolution of something. We're talking about, I was referring to cutting off the evolution of, say, entertainment programming, but when we cut off comedy and cut off the ability to talk about topics, we might be cutting off the evolution of somebody's emotional experience of helping them to cope. And God knows if they're just stuck in this depressive rut and they've got no outlet, they've got no way to deal with this thing other than to say, woe is me, and sit in a dark room, then how does that help anybody?
And, you just kind of think I've got that set. I've got a setup on YouTube, and it's called Entertain the Thought. And I get on stage, and it is a lot of this suicide material if people want to see it. And one of the big comments at the top is a woman saying, I think it was her sister that had passed away, and this is the first time she's laughed at suicide. And that's just from a YouTube clip that I was able to put up and then walk away from. That's still helping somebody. But if you're going to protest me working in the early stages of me doing those jokes, well, then the healing just never happens. And that's the part that, strangely, comedy critics don't care about. And it's the most hurtful part. Well,
and this will tie in a little bit to, obviously everybody's talking about comedy at the top of everybody's list because of the Chappelle thing. And now with this latest Saturday Night Live cast member, Shane Gillis, I believe his name is. Yes, Shane Gillis.
I've worked with Shane. Shane opened for me. Yeah.
I was going to ask you if you knew him. So this is going to be very interesting to hear from you on this.
I was in Baltimore, and they just introduced me to Shane. He's your opening act. And I said, great, nice to meet you. And you never know, since I'm not famous enough to bring the show with me, I'm often in these situations where my opening act is terrible and ruins the room, or I'm in the situations where, oh no, this guy's brilliant, and now I have to follow this guy. Shane was the second. He was crushing, and he wasn't doing anything racist on stage. Shane regularly refers to himself as a dumb, fat white guy, regularly announces that he doesn't know anything, regularly announces he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's kind of a buffoon character. When you talk to him backstage, he's not saying anything racist. He's just readily open about, like, hey, I'm just trying to get through the best I can. But again, like my whole personal experience with him didn't hear anything racist. All I saw was a guy killing for 30 minutes for 5 shows in a row. And I'm standing there at the side of the stage going, oh man, I got to get this together. I got to follow. And you know what? Baltimore is not an all-white city.
No, I would side with you there. I think their demographics might tend
lives
in
in New
different
York.
direction.
He performs for diverse audiences all the time.
And he's from Philly. He's from Philly, which is a very diverse city. A lot of black and a lot of white.
You learn what you can get away with and what you can't. And you know what?
Right,
He's not even being judged on his stand-up comedy. So my report about what his stand-up comedy like is kind of irrelevant. But it is proof like, oh yes, if you see him do stand-up, he'll make the audience laugh. I hope you care about that.
Hey guys, a real quick commercial break here. I told you last week about Bobby Wilson, our fantastic Lions of Liberty Pride supporter. He wanted to use this time again to remind you guys, if you join the Pride, it is not only everything that we offer as far as bonus content, but Bobby is hosting calls now with our other Pride members, going over in-depth conversations about liberty, about libertarian values, and I was told this last one, because the Lions of Liberty are not necessarily on these calls. This is purely the members in our group taking it upon themselves to collaborate, to forge friendships, to deepen their knowledge of liberty. However, sometimes they just want to take pot shots at us, which apparently the last time they did a Lions of Liberty Pride call hosted by Bobby, they just ripped apart all of our Liberty draft picks. So highly recommend you join the Pride, get in on the fun, thanks to our buddy Bobby. You can join at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. To your point, I mean, Saturday Night Live, clearly they had probably watched however many hours of comedy he had out there. He clearly killed it in the auditions for this show. And, it's heartbreaking because this is clearly, almost every comedian's dream. At least it used to be on Saturday Night Live. I don't know if that still is everybody's dream, but it's still a very nice place to be.
It's a nice brass ring. It's an institution saying we've created the best. We've created some of the best comedy in American culture, and we recognize your comedy as fitting with that pedigree. What a huge honor. So,
huge honor for 5 hours, or was it 5 days? It was a huge honor for Shane. But clearly they vetted him as best they could. And then these people find, within a few hours of his being announced, a quote unquote journalist goes through, finds some old ass podcast appearance of 2018 where they were joking about, and I was listening to the clip. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it. It was, and again, the clip I found is still taken out of context because they're cutting out these points where you don't really know what leads into these conversations. You don't know what followed these conversations. And as we were talking about earlier, it's, a lot of these podcasts, since they are extemporaneous, right? When you see a comedian on stage, they have practiced their bits, or at least they've thought a lot about them beforehand. But in a podcast format, you've got comedians who are just kind of, like I said, throwing shit against the trampoline. And maybe, this time the shit came back.
Yeah.
But it is a conversation. It's an evolution. It's something that's freewheeling. And you're just trying to see what's going to be funny and throw things out there in an extemporaneous way. And to see them pillory this man, cost him his job and possibly his career after all the coverage this is getting, is just absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Well, it's number one, the complete inability to give someone the benefit of the doubt. That's poisoned our culture. We've been taught not to trust. We can't trust doctors, and we can't trust lawyers, and we can't trust our neighbors, and we can't trust politicians, and we can't trust the news, and we can't we go through all the people we can't trust, and then somebody says believe all women, and then that of course causes an uproar because we're taught not to trust, and now you want us to believe, and
then of course we have to trust anybody on Twitter that finds a clip that's 15 seconds.
Well, you always
empirically
you're required to trust victims no matter how convoluted the story. Now, here's the thing. Like, when I started stand-up comedy in 2001, the older generation of comics pointed to my generation, which is Aziz Ansari and Whitney Cummings and various people who have done a lot better than I have financially in this business. And the older comics noted, wow, you kids are actually treating this like a business. You're actually not getting shit-faced drunk. You're not doing a bunch of coke. You actually see that you have to present yourself, in a way that's going to fit with these big corporations and whatever else, NBC, SNL, and you're watching out for yourselves. Certainly when the internet came around, I was terrified about what I was going to put up on the internet, because I understood very quickly, oh, this is forever. And so you don't see a lot of personal information about me online. Everything is very carefully crafted and selected. And Shane Gillis came along, and he is part of a culture that has said, hey, you're overweight and you're not good looking and you're white and you're stupid and you're worthless, and we want you to shut the fuck up. And so Shane went, well, I'm never going to be famous, so I might as well just say whatever the fuck I want that's going to make my friends laugh. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that he hates people. It means that he didn't filter anything because he didn't see any benefit in it. And the tragedy is a benefit showed up. A benefit completely unrelated said, oh, we think you're really talented, though. Come do this thing. And then all of a sudden, you're not going to like this.
Well, I mean, I honestly, I worry about even just the stuff. I was just doing this podcast. I've said crazy shit, to make people laugh, to just be goofy. And of course, being a libertarian, coming at it from this perspective of I'm fighting back against these cultural, social justice warriors. Obviously, I've said a lot of things that could piss anybody off. So anybody could go through and ruin my career very easily. But I also think that he definitely is saying these things to make to make people laugh. But in his defense, he said, "Look, I'm a comic. I'm trying to push the boundaries. I'm trying to throw things out there." And people are saying, "Oh, this is a ridiculous way to talk about it, and how dare he defend racism with this thing?" But again, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, you swing and you miss. I mean, you swing and miss more than you hit, and he doesn't have an audience there. He only has one guy that he's reacting to.
That's the sentence that people have been responding to a lot, is that I try to push boundaries, period. And the literal next sentence was, and sometimes I miss. He literally said, and sometimes I miss. And people who care about intention or people who actually want to dismiss intention, they love the fact that they can ignore the next sentence. They love that. Right. They love the idea that they go, oh, yeah, he thinks that what he did was great. No, you're ignoring the next sentence.
Right. Well, that's like, I've seen that over and over again in the age of the internet, is people constantly do that. They will take some, even again, to talk about Chappelle's special, even in Dave Chappelle's special, they take out just the bit that they want to damn the man with and ignore everything else in the context of the conversation. And like you're saying, it's inexcusable that the media runs with it as is, but you see the media do these things as well. I'll give you an example. Mario Lopez, right? A guy that I've briefly met. He does a lot of work with kids. To all reports, is a super sweet guy, a great father, has like 4 kids himself. He got in a shitload of trouble because he had the audacity to go, number one, on Candace Owens' show. So, the SJWs hate Candace Owens because she's a black woman that's not on the left. But, and this was for, I think,
how dare she have her own personal freedoms and choices?
How dare she? Back on the plantation.
Back with the rest of us. Stay in line.
Exactly. So, but he goes on her show, and they get into conversation about trans issues, right? And how specifically about giving young children hormones, and which I don't know how much you know about that topic, but if you give it to them at a young age, it cuts off their ability to become fully functioning sexual adults in their own gender. So, in the context of this conversation, Mario Lopez goes, "Look, I don't want to tell anybody how to be a parent. I think if you're a loving parent, that's the most important thing in the world." He goes, "But I don't, I think that people should," and I'm paraphrasing, "I think people should think twice, basically, before they start to give their kids hormones at age 6.
Twice? He was that hard about it?
I mean, yeah, dude. It's like you would have thought he said, line the trannies up and get the machine guns out. The way people took these contests. And I'm reading, like MSNBC and Huffington Post, the headlines they run with is Mario Lopez comes out against trans children.
Christ. Comes out.
I was like, in no way did he do that. But again, there's no context. and they run with the narrative they want to run with.
I've often compared liberal and conservative politics to liberal and conservative temperament. And I often tell people it's almost like we're walking through the woods together, and then something happens that was unexpected. And what's unexpected is we as a group, we come to a little cliff with a big pond below. And the liberal people say, let's jump in. Life is for the living. We found this great thing. Let's go. And I am one of the conservatives who goes, hey, I'm not going to jump in because I don't know how deep it is. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what kind of water snakes and alligators might be in there. I don't know what's in there. If you're going to jump in, do me a favor. Take your car keys out of your pocket because I don't want to be stranded here. If you guys jump in and have a good time in the water, maybe I'll jump in.
Yeah,
but I'm
come join you.
First.
Right.
So I'm not telling you can't do what you want to do. I'm just telling you what I'm doing, and I'm going to give it a second thought. And
yeah, but the problem is that all the time they go, wait, we're jumping in and we're taking you with us.
And then the headline is apparently Ryan Stout, vicious conservative who hates fun. And you go, God damn, guys. God damn.
You should have heard the things Ryan Stout said about water snakes. He wasn't so sure about them.
Fear.
Ryan Stout hates water snakes.
And it's just so ridiculous. Like you have to walk through the world thinking about some consequences, and if you do, you're considered an asshole.
Yeah. Well, it is funny two sides of the thinking, right? Because like you said, it's all the way in, no thought for the consequences, except all the thought for consequences should we say something that might affect people that are of a certain sex or a certain race or a certain culture. Then all the consequences have to be concerned. What's this going to do? We can't make a joke about a fat person because that will destroy an entire generation of fat women. We have to think about the consequences of our actions. Meanwhile, feel free to give all the drugs to kids that you want. I mean, it's just it is absolutely bizarre, and I have a hard time understanding it a lot because you do think about how many intelligent people are on this woke left and how they just simply, it's like a willfully designed way to avoid thinking about things. And it boggles my mind how they can go through life without understanding on some level that they are just willfully lying to themselves.
I always thought that it was a bunch of people who wanted desperately to feel good. And in order to feel good, they had to avoid any type of thought of things that would feel bad. But then they became obsessed with imagining all the ways that things could possibly feel bad and all of the other people who might feel bad. And you go, well, now you've just got an active imagination. It kind of goes back to, and I feel confident talking about this because we get to look at it in hindsight, which is crystal clear. Back in 2012, 2013, there were all of those articles about rape jokes and these terrible, awful comedians that get on stage and tell jokes about rape. And nobody, not a single person, brought up the fact that, well, stand-up comics, they test their jokes in front of lots of audiences. And if a joke works consistently, it gets put down on the record, sometimes an actual LP or CD or a late night set or a special. And then we can actually look at the work that was created. So if comedians have been telling all of these horrendous rape jokes with no consequences for so long, awesome. Then it should be so easy for you to show me some examples. And you know what they did? They would go, well, I mean, there's just so many out there. Right, like what? Well, I mean, I don't want to do your homework for you. No, you're doing it for you. You're going to do the homework to support your own position. But they couldn't come up with anything. And even worse, no one asked them to. Like nobody confronted them by saying, where are all these jokes? The only example you have is some hearsay story from a blogger who got that story from their friend who was at the show. And there's no proof anywhere. Like, what is going on here, everybody?
It's the way these things snowball, and almost every, not just with jokes or concepts like rape and how rape consequences could play out in the media. But I just look at the way that they banned straws. Like I'm going a totally different direction here, but all these straw bans that are happening are based on a 9-year-old's paper that was not, it was a science project. It wasn't a scientifically vetted piece of work that went through 18 layers before all the states now are banning straws. Now Kamala Harris wants to have a national straw ban. They go, why are we just accepting this? And it's because the media they want this narrative. I don't know what your opinion of the media is right now. And I didn't used to think this way before the age of Trump really came upon us, but I now am pretty convinced that almost 99% of the media is just so left-leaning that I don't know where to turn for real news. And I don't want to turn to Fox either, because I think Fox is definitely going conservative. So I really don't know where to go.
The scariest. You don't know who is actually doing journalism or who's doing activism.
Right.
You really don't know.
Yeah. And it's that way with science too, though. I mean, I'll use the rape statistics for an example. I just read a new study came out, and they said that women, 1 in 16 women in the United States had said that their first experience sexually was rape. Now, after reading an article about this study, this is the headlines they're running with. When I read an article about the study itself actually did not ever say rape. It asked women if their first sexual experience was fully consensual, right. And half the women had responded that they were coerced verbally into having sex. So again, not forced, as you traditionally think of rape. So it's like the redefining of these terms, and to what you're saying about, is it research or is it activism? The lines have become so blurred where the research is activist research, wherein they then create a search or they create a study where it basically, whatever they want to prove will be proven. Yeah. And then the media doesn't question it. They just run.
And what they want to prove is the maximum amount of victims. Because if they can get the maximum amount, well, that's going to be good clickbait. There's often that idea that college campuses that will ask, in questionnaires like, did you want to have sex? And you know what? Whether or not you wanted to and whether or not you agreed to are two completely different things. And I know that because I have agreed to pick people up at LAX 1,000 times. I have never wanted to pick anyone up at LAX. But you know what? They didn't victimize me by asking me and then having me agree. It is not there's a level of personal responsibility when I said, okay, I'm an adult. I'm going to make a choice to do this thing that I don't really want to do to make someone else happy. We do that all the time.
Well, you just got married. I mean, look, hey, I'm married. Your future is your wife maybe not wanting to have sex all the time, but hey, we're married people now. So is that going to be considered rape in 5 years?
And what people will say is absolutely. And just by saying that proves that you're a rapist.
And now I'm canceled. Well, all guys, thank you for tuning in to Electric Libertyland.
This is the last episode, number 140, whatever it was. So long.
142. Well, let's get into that a little bit, because I was looking at this, and actually, let me play. Just I'm excited to use this feature. I'm going to play a clip, and you'll be able to hear it. I've advanced this technology in the show far enough now. I'm going to play this Adam Carolla clip, and that way you can listen in live to what he said, because I didn't even realize there were any comedians on the Alec Baldwin roast that's on Comedy Central. I think
it was last
night. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay. So I'm going to do a quick share here, and you'll be able to enjoy this clip, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Alec, you're a great friend and a great actor. And if I can rant for just 1 minute here, you're a great sport. You have a great sense of humor, unlike the social justice warriors who are going to be out there tweeting that all the jokes are problematic. You people can blow me, you pussy fucksticks. This is a goddamn roast. Comedians need a place where they can be offensive without your bullshit fake outrage. You hashtag heroes. You already ruined the Oscars. You're all woke and no joke. So, if you were offended by anything said tonight, please give a reach around to your emotional support dog and shut the fuck up. This This is our safe space, bitches.
That was pretty much
I
it. Can
couldn't
you
hear
hear
it
it?
at all, but I read the little clip. I read the bottom. Yeah.
Oh,
No, it's
damn
fine.
it. What is the point of having a screen share ability on this show? God damn it. All right. Well, so at least you're able to read it. Well, I guess the people listening, because God damn it, I did a test before the show too.
We'll fix it in post.
It was fine. Exactly. I'll play it. Don't worry.
So that goes back to our safe space issue that we talked about. That is, on private property, people are allowed to do what they want to do as long as they're not breaking the law.
Yep.
And if you agree to be there, if you agree to take somebody to LAX, you have committed to something, whether you like it or not.
I tried never to. Yeah. Well, something he brought up, and I've seen this too, and to reference Chappelle's show again, he also said to the audience, shut the fuck up. So he said, basically, anybody that's got a problem, shut the fuck up, to social justice warriors in general. I'm wondering now if this is going to be a common refrain. Is this going to be the fighting war cry of the comedian? Because and do you think, follow-up question, number one, will it be the war cry of the comedian, or do you think too many people are woke and too cowardly to do it? And number two, do you think that there will be a turning point in all of this anytime in the near future?
Well, because I'm kind of an optimist, I hope I think there will be a turning point. I think people will kind of get the idea, because there are a lot of voices who are, you know what, now that we've gotten a grasp on this kind of social justice vocabulary that they've started to weaponize, and now that we can actually use the words back and be like, no, that doesn't mean what you want it to mean, just because you want it to mean that. We're going to be able to fight back with words, and when they use their own language, I want to read something to you, because I posted this on Instagram recently. It was a stupid little tweet that I wrote, but I took the typical language of social justice warriors, and they're always dividing things into two, and they're always looking at the oppressor and the victim, and then they go from there. So I said, the world of comedy only has two groups: comedy consumers and comedy creators. Now, consumers are the majority, and creators are the minority. So anytime you, as an audience member, speak out against a comedian, you're punching down from your pedestal of majority privilege. And it's completely sarcastic, but I mean, that's the fucking logic that you guys are using in this shit.
Oh, totally. Well, did anybody respond to you, by the way, angrily saying that you were off base, or did people get it? Because I swear to God, as we've seen, any joke, no matter how sarcastic you think you're being, some dumb woke asshole will take it 100% at face value.
Well, one woman started to, and then I wrote, clearly you did not read it. And she said, I did read it. I read it several times, and here were my thoughts. And she starts laying out her thoughts, and then she writes, unless you were just being facetious. And you know what I did? Didn't respond.
I hope you should have screenshotted it, sent it back to her, and said, I'm just going to keep this for posterity in case you delete your
I want
tweets.
Everybody to know that this existed. So your second question was, do I think it will end? Which is, I think it will end. I think it'll die down when the popularity of comedy kind of dies down a little bit. I think once the capitalist consumers stop feeling like they are entitled to laugh at every joke from every comedian, I feel like they will ease off. And hopefully it will breed a brand new set of consumers, a younger generation of consumers who will gladly say, oh, that comedian, yes, they make people laugh a lot, but it's not for me. I prefer this other thing. And you know what? I really wish we had more consumers who could speak positively about stand-up rather than the endless waves of negativity. Because they teach that in liberal art schools, that when you look at a painting, you can talk about why it's bad all day long. Any idiot can make up reasons why the Mona Lisa is shit. But you actually have to know about painting in order to talk about what makes it a good painting. And because we have a society that cannot look at a comedian and talk at length about why the comedy is good, even though they don't personally like it, until we have that society, comedians are going to continue to get just hounded for everything that comes out of our mouths, and it's going to go in waves, just like it has since 1945. But I think that's just kind of the way it is. Well,
it's also, I think that the compound of people can't say enough. It is difficult to really break down and be complimentary to comedy because people don't understand it. Number one, if you haven't done it, it's very hard to break it down and say this is why it works. Sure. This is why this band's a genius or not. So I agree with you there. But also, the culture right now is designed to reward the loudest critics. And you can become internet famous by being the loudest critic. You get kudos from your friends and loved ones and whatever else for being an internet critic. So, I think it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that comedy has to become less popular just because you're going to have less people, number one, that want to go into it. You're going to have less people that are going into it with the right intentions, unless people are just going specifically to critique it. And then I also worry, and this is what I was thinking about with Alec Baldwin's roast and these roasts in general. I mean, if you're a comic, why would you want to go on these shows necessarily? And, because you're not going to be able to do your funniest material without knowing you're going to get some sort of backlash. And it could ruin your career.
Or the other problem is that the benefit might not even be there. You could go on the roast and kill, and they go, "Oh yeah, that one was funny."
Yeah. They cut. Well, a lot of comics I've heard they cut their best jokes out because they are too offensive.
Well, and the other thing is the roasts. The whole idea of a roast was a bunch of people who know each other coming together and having a good-natured, nice ribbing. And even though it can get mean, it's all about, showing loving disrespect. Now you've got people on stage with people they've never met before.
Yeah, I didn't know Alec Baldwin and Caitlyn Jenner were close pals. But
and by the way,
and
then they're excited to say, "I've never even fucking heard of you. I don't know what you're doing here." Which they've been doing since I first saw the Drew Carey roast on Comedy Central. What? 18 years ago?
Oh God, yeah. It's
20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
20 years ago, people are standing at the podium saying, "Look at these faces on the dais. I've never heard of any of them." And here we are 2 decades later. No. And the sad part, and I don't want people to misinterpret this, the sad part is not that the comedians and the jokes aren't original. The sad part is that the audience is still eating it up. The audience hasn't evolved in 20 years. And yet they're complaining just as much as they always do when comedy's popular, and they still haven't learned anything new. The consumer today is just as much in the dark as the consumer 20 years ago. They think, well, I watch a lot of comedy, so I know what good comedy is. No. Until you can explain to me why the comedy that you hate is good comedy anyway, you don't know a fucking thing.
Yeah.
And what's weird is in all the other creative art forms, that's what they're taught in school. They're taught again and again. We don't care if you like the painting or hate the painting. We're going to teach you why it's good. We don't care if you like the poem or hate the poem. We're going to teach you why it's good. Like the film, hate the film. Fuck you. Here's why it's good. And yet there's nobody doing that with stand-up. And so all we get is negativity.
Or comedy in general. That is actually really interesting to think about. Comedy, again, always underappreciated as an art form. And you're exactly right. No one's examining the comedy brushstrokes. Although I do want to talk about, and we'll wrap it up, so we've been talking for almost an hour, but I do want to talk about your Instagram. And I know you haven't updated it most recently, but you have a great Instagram that I've followed along and really enjoyed, and you were doing for a while, called You Hate Jokes. And it was really fascinating because Ryan would do a deep dive on a lot of feedback on, people would get internet angry over different jokes, whether they're offhand jokes or comedians' jokes, and do an interesting breakdown of why they were wrong, why this joke is interesting or not. So tell me a little bit about why you wanted to do that, even though, like I said, don't go, you're not going to see the freshest ones, but follow it anyway, because I believe that after this inspirational talk,
I get inspired now and then when I have free time. So I had a few ideas when it came to You Hate Jokes, which was I was very tired of seeing news stories where a news reporter would report on a joke and only report the negativity of it and only report the consequences of it. And no one would give any analysis to the joke itself. And it almost goes back to what was happening with rape jokes in 2012, 2013. They would talk about rape jokes by talking endlessly about rape and saying nothing about jokes. And you go, well, that's not the topic.
Here's the rape statistics.
That is not the topic at all. If we're going to talk about rape paintings, you have to say something about paintings. If we're going to talk about rape sculptures, you have to say something about sculptures. Here we are talking about rape jokes, so fucking talk about jokes, goddammit. And they would not, because that is not buzzworthy. So we've got all of these clickbait stories in the news, and it is my theory that the reason that it works as clickbait is because people sitting at home want to see, well, do I like the joke or do I not like the joke? Like, people want to weigh in because they want to feel like the king of the castle. And then there's always some sort of benefit or consequence, which is whatever happens to the person in the story who told the joke. If that person suffers, the reader at home goes, yeah, I don't like the joke. Fuck them. I'm glad. And then if the person in the joke, if the joke is funny and the person at home goes, well, this isn't fair, they, in their mind, they go, well, this is just proof of the goddamn liberal left. Or they say, well, this is just proof of the goddamn conservative right. And they rationalize all these reasons why society is falling apart rather than talk about the joke. And I just want people desperately, just talk about the joke, everybody. Just talk about it a little bit. Yeah. Because then you can nod your head and go, horse walks into a bar. Bartender says, why the long face? Oh, okay, I got it. Long face. It's a wordplay joke. Okay, I'm gonna move on with life. Like, having a sense of humor is not laughing at everything, and it's not policing what everybody else laughs at. It's actually your ability to fold your arms and look around and go, oh, okay, yeah, if they want to laugh at that, go ahead.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm not laughing, but they can. It's fine. Who cares? We're on this little blue marble for a few years and then we're dead. Yeah, it's fine. But you hate jokes. It's a hard thing to keep up with because the way I describe it was I go to my favorite search engine. I type in the word joke. I click news and I click last 24 hours and I look at all the stories that come up, and I intentionally ignored stories. I tried to about stand-up comedians. I intentionally wanted this to be amateurs telling jokes. A pizza delivery driver who wrote a joke underneath the box lid because they were.
Yeah, or like the guy who was an Uber executive that got fired for making a joke. I think you covered that one. It was like an offhand joke about a female executive or something like that he got fired for the next day.
There are just so many examples out there. I mean, a Netflix person got fired because they were talking about words that they didn't want you to say on Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah, he said the N-word out loud in the context of we should not say this word.
And they said you can't say that. It's your meeting and you can't say it. Yeah, unbelievable. So it's one of those projects that I like doing, but it's also it really kind of wears on me because it is pretty depressing. Because it is pretty endless. But then magically there are days where there's not that much. And that's something that I've been doing this for years, like looking up these stories for years. I didn't always Instagram them, but it was always a little hobby of mine. And the flow of jokes was always pretty consistent and the outrage was consistent. And then it's kind of started to, there'd be little droughts for a few days here and there. And I think it's a little bit because people are tired. I think they're tired of being outraged a little bit. And I think they're just tired from the administration and they're tired from, all the outrage that's not over jokes. There's just a lot of outrage in general that they just go, look, we have to pick and choose our outrage battles.
We have so much outrage to go around. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question specifically, and I know we're short on time, but
well, no, we've got time. I'm gonna do a little 10-minute bonus with you after this too. That's why I want to wrap this up, and then the paid people can hear some extra bonus. But no, ask me.
So this question is going to be, and maybe we do this for the bonus question. Yeah, I'll ask it as a teaser, and if they want to go to the bonus, they can.
High level. Yeah, let's do it. Ask away.
I have a very specific theory about why comedy is not taught in schools and it's not appreciated by the consumers, and it's directly associated with capitalism. And I wanted to see if you had any thoughts about capitalism and jokes.
This is very interesting and a great high-level teaser. So you guys will just have to find out if you want to join the Lions of Liberty Pride to find out the answer to this question, which I am fascinated to talk about, you could go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. And Ryan, tell everybody where they can find you, where you're going to be. I know you're going to be on Fox, I think.
We did a little summer session of the show called Punchline, and that's recently ended, but they might be doing reruns. I'm performing around LA pretty soon here. I'm at the Improv. I'm at the Ice House. I'm going to probably go down to the Comedy Magic Club pretty soon here. But I really encourage people to go to Spotify and look up my name, or Apple Music, or whatever service, because I did, like a true scientist, I tested all those jokes on audiences around the country, around the world, and then I put them down on record for you to hear. So if you want to hear what audiences have approved of, please go look up. My first album is Touche. My second album is called How to Be an Audience. And my third album, the most recent, Man in the Suit. You fucked me up on that. God damn it.
I fucked you up on that, I know.
Man in the Suit. They're all available to listen. And go to YouTube/Ryan Stout and watch some clips there. I'm a guy that talks about stand-up, and I hope you'll watch my stand-up.
I would highly recommend that. And again, you can also follow you at Stout Ryan on Twitter. And I think Instagram as well, right?
Instagram is at Stout Cider. SIDER.
Oh,
like outsider, but with an ST. Yeah.
I see what you did there. We don't need to break that joke down. I think people get it. All right. Well, again, beautiful having you on. I will see you in the bonus show. And so all of you out there, go listen to Ryan. Go download and buy his albums. I can't recommend it enough. And we will definitely have you back on. So that'll do it for Ryan's appearance on this show. Guys, you can go and find his albums. You can find his website. You can find links to his previous appearances over at lionsofliberty.com/ELL142. And also, as I wrap this show up, I want to remind you guys that we now have a referral program for the Libertarian Party. So you can go to lp.org/Lions of Liberty. So if you're getting inspired, if you want to be more involved, if you want to be an agent for change within the party, or if you like the way the party's going, you can go and join as you do, and you go and support our show by going to that link. Well, maybe we'll benefit a little bit too. Maybe we get a little piece of that pie. So go ahead, if you're thinking about joining the Libertarian Party, lp.org/Lions of Liberty. Help them, help us, help Liberty. And that way we can all pal around at the Libertarian Convention together. And wouldn't that be fun? And of course, go listen to Mark Claire on Mondays with his interviews with leaders in the Liberty movement on our flagship Lions of Liberty program, as well as listening in to Felony Fridays every Friday, hosted by John Odermatt, where he interviews with fascinating results, by the way, but interviews people who have gone through or are helping those in the criminal justice system, exposing the fallacies, lies, and also sometimes stories that are just absolutely inspiring of people who have found ways to come back out in the free market, make their way, help others, help themselves, and really just come out on top after this whole horrible situation, which, of course, is influenced by our government. All right, that's going to do it, guys. From me, Brian McWilliams, from the Lions of Liberty, from Electric Libertyland. Always stay plugged into Liberty.